Welcome to the discussion of the Best Bite-Size podcast about the rise of China's hacker army on the global stage and why the world may already be too late to respond. For years, we've heard, murmurs, almost whispers, about China's growing capabilities in cyberspace. But it seems like it's gone way beyond that now. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the sheer scale, the intensity of their digital efforts, specifically their hacking operations.
Yeah, it sounds like something straight out of a thriller, doesn't it? A bit cyberpunk,
Yeah.
almost. But the evidence, it really points to a significant, and I'd say incredibly determined push by China in this area.
Right.
We're not talking about, isolated little incidents here and there. We're seeing evidence of a nation actively targeting critical infrastructure. Think about places like the United States.
Okay.
Targeting the very systems that underpin our daily lives. Electricity, water treatment, communications. It's actually quite sobering when you dig into it.
It is sobering. It's frankly a little chilling to even think about. And you might picture, a small group of elite super hackers, right? But the reality seems much bigger, maybe even more unsettling.
That's a good way to put it. While they might not always have the absolute, cutting-edge technical advantage in every single specific area compared to, say, the U.S., their sheer persistence, their unwavering focus, that seems to be a huge factor here.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where did this whole thing, this phenomenon, really start to take shape?
Well, look, the basic idea of wanting to explore, and sometimes, let's be honest, exploit computer systems, that's been around almost as long as computers themselves.
Sure.
Since the beginning, you've had people driven by curiosity or maybe less positive intentions trying to, poke around in these digital spaces.
Right, the classic image, the lone hacker in a dark room somewhere. But what we seem to be seeing with China, it sounds like a totally different kind of thing. Much more organized,
Yeah.
state-driven.
Precisely. That's the key difference. Over the past, say, 2 decades, China has really undertaken a very deliberate, very systematic effort. They've been cultivating this whole ecosystem of hacking talent.
An ecosystem.
Yeah, it's not just about random individuals. It's a state-backed initiative. And the clear goal is building a significant cyber operations capability.
So the aim isn't just like traditional spying, stealing secrets and blueprints. There is a bigger strategic game here.
Exactly. That's a crucial point. The main strategic goal when you're talking about gaining and keeping access to these critical systems, it goes beyond just intelligence gathering. It's really about giving their military leadership options.
Options.
Yeah. The potential to disrupt essential functions in another country during a conflict. That represents a very, very powerful strategic advantage.
That is. Yeah, a deeply unsettling thought. Now, we recently got a pretty rare look inside this world, didn't we? Can you tell us about this iSoon leak? That sounded like a real crack in the secrecy wall.
Oh, absolutely. The iSoon leak was fascinating because it gave us this incredibly rare window into how China's cybersecurity operations actually work on the ground. It was like, lifting the hood on a pretty significant player in their cyber landscape, exposing their internal chats, their operational details. It gave us a vital glimpse into how the Chinese government uses private companies, private expertise, to hit its cyber targets.
Okay, so what did these leaked secrets actually show about how the hacking gets done? It's not all just one giant government agency pulling all the strings.
No, not at all, it seems. The evidence really points towards the Chinese government frequently contracting out work to smaller private cybersecurity firms. They essentially hire these companies to carry out hacking operations on their behalf.
Right.
The leaked chat logs, for instance, showed engineers at this company, iSoon, just casually talking about successfully breaking into email servers.
Wow.
It really highlights a more distributed approach, I guess you could say, to conducting cyber espionage.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about the control, the oversight.
Distributed, and it sounds like surprisingly widespread. I mean, the targets weren't just like national secrets, were they?
That's right. That was another surprising thing from the iSoon documents. It showed just how pervasive these hacking activities are within the Chinese state itself. They apparently had contracts not just with national agencies or provincial law enforcement, but even with city-level police departments. Imagine your local city cops contracting out hacking services.
That's wild.
It really underscores the scale and how deeply integrated these capabilities seem to be across all sorts of levels of government there.
It really makes you wonder, where do they even find these hackers? Is there some kind of, pipeline?
Well, interestingly, there seems to be a pretty direct link to state-sponsored hacking competitions.
Okay.
These aren't just fun and games or academic exercises. The vulnerabilities, the flaws that are discovered in these contests, they're often then reportedly used, exploited by firms like iSoon for their government contracts, for their hacking activities.
So the competitions feed the operations.
It creates a kind of real-world testing ground, you could say, and effectively, yeah, a recruitment pool for these operations.
That's a fascinating connection. And yeah, a little disturbing too. Casts those competitions in a totally different light. Speaking of competitions, that whole scene seems to have changed quite a bit, right? Especially if you look at international events like Ubuntu Own.
Yes, exactly. Ubuntu Own is a great example. Since, what, 2007? It's been a highly respected international competition. The focus is finding vulnerabilities in real-world stuff. Phones, browsers, even things like EV chargers recently.
Right, finding the bugs before the bad guys do.
That's the idea. The underlying principle is ethical hacking. Find the bugs so they can be fixed, patched, secured before they're exploited maliciously.
And for a while there, Chinese teams were major players in Puntuon, and really successful too, weren't they? I remember hearing about teams like Tencent, 360 Kihu.
Oh, absolutely. They were dominant, really successful. They saw Puntuon as this big international stage to show off their research chops.
But then they stopped coming.
That's right. Around 2018, that changed. The Chinese government basically restricted their teams from participating in these international competitions anymore.
That definitely sounds like a deliberate move, a strategy shift. And wasn't that around the time their own government-backed competitions, like the Tianfu Cup, started getting bigger?
Exactly. They started promoting their own domestic competitions.
So what's the key difference between Pintuon and something like the Tianfu Cup? It can't just be the location.
No, the crucial difference, the really critical distinction, is where the vulnerabilities that are discovered actually end up.
Okay.
Instead of being reported back to the companies like Apple or Google so they can fix them, in competitions like Tianfu Cup, those vulnerabilities are directly reported to Chinese intelligence agencies.
Oh.
So, that clever iPhone hack a researcher finds, it could very well be turned around and used by the state for surveillance or other operations.
Okay, that is a stark difference. Not fixing the problem, but weaponizing it.
Pretty much, yeah. We've seen evidence suggesting that's exactly what happens.
And that seems to tie directly into this really unique policy they brought in back in 2021 about reporting software vulnerabilities.
Ah, yes. That regulation, that's a really significant piece of this puzzle. It's called the Regulation on the Management of Software Vulnerabilities. And it basically mandates that any business operating in China, if they find a software vulnerability, they must report it to the government.
Must report it. How quickly?
Within 48 hours of finding out about it.
48 hours. That is incredibly fast.
It is. It essentially gives the Chinese government almost immediate access, first dibs, on newly discovered flaws across a huge range of software used globally.
How does that stack up against, say, the U.S. approach? Do companies have to tell the NSA or CIA about bugs they find?
No, not like that. In the U.S., while agencies like the CIA and NSA certainly discover and, yes, probably collect vulnerabilities, there's no legal requirement for companies or researchers to report those flaws to the government. It's a much more decentralized, voluntary system over here.
Interesting. So, okay, both countries, maybe similar goals in some ways, like, controlling the information space, preparing for cyber conflict.
Sure, some overlap in strategic aims.
But the methods seem pretty different. And it definitely sounds like China's activity in this whole area has just ramped up significantly.
Absolutely. You can see it in the growth, the sheer number and scale of their state-sponsored hacking competitions. That's a clear sign of this increased focus. And we're seeing the real-world fallout, right? The alleged ISOON leak we talked about, and then the indictments from U.S. prosecutors against ISOON employees and officials linked to them. That's likely just scratching the surface.
The tip of the iceberg, yeah. And the targets, they aren't just limited to the U.S., are they? This sounds like a truly global campaign.
Oh, the reach is definitely extensive. We've seen credible reports implicating Chinese state actors in targeting, well, phone companies, state agencies in places like India, Malaysia, Taiwan.
Okay.
Even the British government, think tanks based in London. They've reportedly been hit by Chinese cyber espionage, too. The scope is pretty breathtaking, actually.
And back here in the U.S., we've heard these names, these suspected state-backed groups like Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon, and reports they've managed to get inside critical infrastructure using that living off the land technique. And that sounds particularly tricky to deal with.
It is incredibly tricky. Living off the land, or LOTL, basically means the hackers aren't bringing in their own obvious custom-made malware necessarily. Instead, they cleverly use the legitimate tools and resources that are already inside the system they've compromised.
Like using the house's own tools.
Exactly. They use built-in Windows utilities, administrative scripts, things that look like normal network activity. This makes them incredibly hard to spot because their actions blend in with everyday operations. There's often no big red flag for traditional security systems.
Sneaky, like an intruder using the building's own keys and staff uniform.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
And that Volt Typhoon hack that targeted Guam. That feels particularly pointed, doesn't it, given Guam's strategic location?
It really does. Guam is a U.S. territory, it hosts a critical military base, and it's geographically close to Taiwan.
Right.
It's a vital link for any potential U.S. response in that region. So seeing evidence of successful infiltration into its telecom, federal networks, even military networks, that raises very serious questions about China's potential ability to hinder, maybe even disrupt, U.S. actions right where it matters most strategically.
And the fact they could be lurking undetected for long periods.
That's deeply concerning. It really makes you pause and think about the potential scenarios.
Yeah, it's almost overwhelming when you try to grasp the sheer scale of it all.
Yeah.
The U.S., has had maybe 50, 70 years to build up its tech sector. China's growth in this area, while maybe more recent, feels incredibly fast and focused.
That's a really crucial point to understand. While the U.S. ICT sector, information and communication technology, has grown massively over many decades, China's sector has seen this exponential surge, particularly in the last 20 years or so.
Right.
And while the U.S. certainly has areas of huge innovation and maybe sophistication, what seems to distinguish China is the sheer reported scale of its hacking program. Some reports, some analyses, suggest it's actually larger than the programs of every other major nation combined.
Combined. Wow. Let that sink in.
It's a staggering thought, isn't it?
It really is. So what can actually be done, realistically? Is there any effective way to truly counter this level of activity? It feels a bit like trying to stop every drop of rain in a massive storm.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good way to put it. Completely stopping all Chinese hacking activity.
Yeah.
That's probably a monumental task, maybe even impossible.
So the focus shifts.
The focus really has to shift towards mitigation, towards building resilience. That means constantly improving our own digital defenses, getting better at detecting intrusions early, and maybe most critically, really pushing hard on the international stage to establish and promote norms.
Norms, like rules of the road for cyberspace.
Exactly. Norms around responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities, norms around online safety, what's acceptable state behavior online and what isn't. Getting some kind of global consensus on that is going to be absolutely essential going forward.
It really feels like we've only just scratched the surface here. This is incredibly complex, hugely significant. The determination, the reported scale, the strategic implications. It's a lot to take in. And honestly, it's profoundly concerning.
It absolutely is. This isn't just about technology or spying. It has deep implications for global politics, for international relations, national security, and ultimately, even for the stability and security of our everyday lives that depend so much on this infrastructure.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I think it really highlights just how interconnected and maybe how vulnerable our modern world has become. It underscores why cybersecurity is so incredibly important, not just for governments or big companies, but really for every single one of us in our digital lives.
And maybe it leaves us with a really important question to think about. In a world where these cyber capabilities are becoming so powerful, so dominant, how do we effectively balance that critical need for security with the principles we value, like an open and interconnected global internet? That's a really complex equation. There are no easy answers there.
A truly sobering thought to end on. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
See you soon with another guide like this.